determining accommodations for statewide assessments. Today is December 12th, and my name is Abe Christ from the Performance Office at the CSDE. I'm joined today by my colleagues, in particular, Deirdre Ducharme and Katie Seifert, who are going to do the presenting in the next few minutes. Also behind the scenes, Kim Bean and Kim Johnson are also on the webinar helping us out run things. And I know there's also members of our performance office. I saw Christy Alberino on, so the other members of our performance office are here to support us today if other things come up. So again, thank you for attending today. Next slide, please. In order to make today a success, we have created some norms for the presentation. Those include all your everybody who is in the webinar will remain on mute. We will be monitoring and responding to questions in the chat during the meeting, and any unanswered questions we'll try to get to at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't get to them, it's possible we don't cover them, you can certainly email us. There will also be a survey at the end if you're anxious to drop it in there too. We could address it that way too. The PowerPoint should be posted in the chat by one of my colleagues if it hasn't already been done so. And then finally, the session is being recorded and will be posted to the training page of the CSDE website, as well as the PPT Section 504 accommodation webpage. I'm actually going to amend this dot point on the run here. It's actually already posted. So if you go there, you'll see those presentations. I'm going to turn it over to Katie Seifert now. Again, Katie and Deirdre are going to handle the bulk of the presentation. And Katie, I'm going to hand you the baton now. Katie.
All right. Thanks, Abe. So once again, welcome to the office hours on best practices for determining accommodations for statewide assessments. Here is the agenda for today's office hours. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of topics that we're going to be covering today during our session. Some of these topics include knowing your students, the assets and barriers, accessibility features to bridge the gap, and establishing a systematic process for identifying, implementing, and evaluating accessibility supports during instruction and assessments. And then we're going to wrap up by going through different resources that we have available for you, your teams, and your families. So this quote sets the tone of why we are here. We all want to ensure that all students have access to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding and to be as independent as possible. So now we're going to get into knowing your students. As educators, we need to know our students. This means intentionally being able to identify their strengths and assets, as well as areas of need, and develop bridges that aid students in overcoming instructional barriers. Examining these attributes listed here, as well as others, will provide a holistic picture of what the student is as a learner and a member of our educational community. We fully know our students. When we fully know our students, we can show them how to use their strengths as learners to reach their greatest potential. This slide supports Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, knowing your students and their learning styles and their profiles. Know their passions, their talents, and their preferences, and use those as a catalyst to support them in their learning. So, an asset-based mindset is an approach that involves understanding what a student can and is able to do using the principles of UDL. Each one of us has our own unique strengths and preferences and learning styles that we bring to the table each and every day. Every child, no matter where they rank in relation to their peers, is developmentally hardwired for growth and learning. We can capitalize on this by identifying and utilizing strengths to help reduce these barriers. Operating from a student's or child's strengths does not deny that there are deficits, as in the case for each and every one of us, but rather uses those strengths to catalyze and accelerate learning. This perspective replaces an emphasis on problems and deficits. When we talk about and we define what an asset can be, we always want to look at It is a way to ground what we believe about a student's potential based on knowing what their strengths are. When we talk about a student's performance and apply an asset-based thinking, we highlight what they're good at and how their interests motivate them to learn, and we bring growth to the forefront of the discussion. Additionally, in having a mindset where it is asset-based, we put where we place a value on their talents, their skills, their interests, and again, their strengths of our students at any given point in their progression of learning. So it's not just looking at one area, but it's at that progression of learning. We're constantly looking at where their strengths and talents lie in order to develop instruction. We also put a value on what makes them unique and different. It also allows us to see opportunities, hope, and solutions rather than just problems and hopelessness. So think about when we frame things in asset-based mindset, not only what that does to student efficacy, but also in their belief in themselves, but also how it frames that perspective for the parents. So when we're taking a look at barriers, I want you to think of when you're planning a vacation. You know you might run into detours, flight delays, cancellations, and other roadblocks that may get in the way of reaching your destination. Some of those barriers are predictable, like traffic and road work and bad weather. Knowing and anticipating those barriers can help you plan your trip so you can still get to your destination and enjoy your wonderful vacation. And that could be like, you know there's a roadblock. You're going to schedule it into ways. You're going to use that technology or that accessibility support to help you get there. Planning for instruction and assessment is no different. Barriers can be presented for that student that inhibit them from reaching their instructional goals or demonstrating their knowledge that they possess. Just like planning for a trip, some barriers are known and can be reduced or removed with intentional planning. Knowing that there's going to be road work, you use your ways. You use intentional planning. The same thing can happen within the instructional setting for that student. The first thing educator teams need to do is identify the specific and unique strengths and the barriers that each student has. Once you have this information, then you can review instructional methods and materials to help students gain the skills they need to become expert learners. So we've listed here some different student needs that you may see within your student's learning profile. And when we're looking at the different barriers a student may encounter in the educational setting, they may fall into one or more than one of these categories or areas on the slide. As educators, we have a unique opportunity to meet students where they are at and to support them and provide them tools and strategies to reduce these barriers. While we can't control how a student learns or their learning profile, we can control our instructional practices and the activities we develop for learning. It's always important to gather data on a student and their student learning profile. With this information, teachers can apply this understanding when reviewing the principles of universal design for learning and to bridge access into instruction and access also into letting them show what they know. Knowing what students can do and knowing their preferred pathway to learning aids in the reduction of barriers for students. And it also builds the educator team in helping to choose what is the most appropriate tool. So if you know their strengths, you know where their learning profile is, you know where their learning entrance points are, and you know their barriers, then it helps you choose the right tool for the job and it increases inclusive and equitable instructional applications. So once you've gathered that data, then you can have that, you can gather a checklist of accessibility features that are available. Once you've determined where the student's strengths and needs lie in instruction assessment setting, then it is time to review those tools and ensure that you're choosing the right tool for the job that is going to be a barrier reduction for that student and not something that might cause an additional barrier. Certain teams are also going to want to sit there and identify specific goals around usage of that tool, how that student's going to access that tool, training not only for the student on how to use that tool, but all staff that have vested interest in work with that student, so they are also aware of how that tool performs and how that tool provides access. And then also you want to look at how you're going to apply that tool for the application, as well as how you're going to then fade any supports and then and increase independence for that student. So our goal is always to increase students' abilities to demonstrate their understanding and gain access and increase their independence. This can be done by looking at and reviewing the guiding principles of Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. There's not a one size fits all approach in education. So it's not definitely not one size fits all. Learner variability, so differences in learners, creates these jagged learning profiles. So we don't have just one size, there's peaks and valleys and jaggedness to each student that can shift, in ourselves, that can shift and change depending on the context. Also, each student profile looks different since their lived experiences and other factors may be impacting their learning. So when we get into looking at the principles of UDL, it is to improve access to instruction and assessment for all students. Connecticut's statewide assessments incorporate the principles of UDL. This principle is a scientifically valid framework for guiding educational and assessment practices that provide flexibility in ways that information is presented and represented, how the students respond and demonstrate knowledge and skills, and how they engage in their learning. Incorporating the principles of UDL reduces barriers, provides appropriate accommodations and supports, and maintains high achievement expectations for all students. These guidelines are intended to be applied and integrated consistently during all phases of instruction and planning, and the development of accessible instructional and assessment materials. For example, the principle should be inclusive of diverse populations. Content should be accessible and non-biased. Procedure should be simple and clear. We have included a quick overview here of Universal Design for Learning. And as you can see here on this graphic, you see that there is an engagement, and that is our why of learning. And then we get into representation, what is the what of learning, and how we represent and present the information. And then we get into action and expression, and that is the how of learning. So we have hyperlinked this image here into the CAST website. The CAST website goes into detail of each of these areas: engagement, representation, action, and an expression. When we take a look at each area, if we know our students' strengths lie in one of these areas, say engagement, we can click on engagement and then go to specific checkpoints of where that student's strength lies to see different activities and tools and resources available to continue to build upon that strength. Also, in the inverse, we can look at that for areas of need. If we see that there's an area of need and engagement, we can look at that specific checkpoint when we're looking into engagement to see different tools and strategies that we can trial and try with our students to see about building up that area for them. So I highly recommend checking out the CAST website. Okay, so as educators, we can document strengths and barriers across several different platforms. We have listed some of these platforms below. So in the individualized education program or plan, we are listing those strengths and the areas of need within several areas of this document, within the present levels of performance, with our goals and objectives, with our supplementary aids and services, and our accessibility areas of accommodations and modifications, as well as within looking at the evaluations that are presented there. Same as for the Section 504 plan. Our educational evaluations are rich with information on education and student learning profiles. When we look at these evaluations, we gain a powerful insight into the student learning profile from various different sources. We can see the students' cognitive strengths and their learning styles, and we can use that information as building blocks for that individual to shore up and support areas of need. There's also assistive technology evaluations and trials that we can take a look at to see what tools the student is accessing with success and what we may want to continue on, or tools that we have tried and they may not be the right fit for that student. We can also look at English learner and multilingual multi-learner language plans. We can look at SRBI plans for students who are not identified as areas of where they are succeeding and have strengths in areas that we can shore up. And we can also look at educator recommendations. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Deirdre to talk about accessibility features that bridge the gap.
Great, thank you, Katie, and good morning, colleagues. I'm going to take some time to share some accessibility tools that are available for our students and also those supports available on statewide assessments. I'd like to begin by walking through a three-tier accessibility approach. And this framework illustrates how accessibility tools aid students specific to need and purpose. One perspective is to view this framework as a bridge that connects accessibility to instruction and learning. This bridge allows students to demonstrate their understanding and knowledge. It is designed so that all students, including those who may be learning English or have specific needs, can fully participate in their learning with meaning and success. Teachers can make classrooms more inclusive by promoting universal tools and technology as a tool for everyone. And looking at the largest portion of this bridge, Tier 1, universal tools are available to all students. While we will discuss this tier in greater detail later in the presentation, universal tools are those that every student should have access if beneficial. These may include things like scratch paper, a highlighter, or a thesaurus. These tools can be utilized by any student that needs them at any point in time, regardless of activity and content area. The bridge below, or Tier 2, is for a smaller subgroup of students. Here, the educator team reviews strengths and barriers to determine if designated supports are needed. An example of a Tier 2 support might include those that promote visual access for those that need them. Designated supports such as the digitalized streamline presentation, Zoom, and text-to-speech may help orient students who require assistance when accessing print and text. Finally, the smallest portion of the bridge, Tier 3, is for an even more specialized subset of students who have an individualized education plan or Section 504 plan. Many of these students have identified accommodations documented within these plans so that they can better access instruction and assessment. Here, we have an additional tool that will support our educators in determining how these tools should be selected. So you'll see the 5-step decision-making tool that can be customized to access student instruction and assessment. When embedded systematically in a district or school, all educator teams should be made aware of the expectation and processes to ensure consistency and equity for all learners. Let's take a quick walkthrough of the 5-step decision-making tool. Step 1, expect that all students will achieve grade level standards. Step 2, learn about accessibility supports. Step 3, select appropriate accessibility supports. Steps 4 and 5, administer and evaluate accessibility supports during instruction and on assessments. We will be covering all 5 steps throughout this presentation, and you'll find that we've included a variety of resources to help you accomplish each of these steps. The first step in the 5-step decision-making process is to expect that all students have access to high-quality, rigorous, and grade-level instruction aligned to the Connecticut core standards. Educator teams who are familiar with characteristics and needs of learners should meet with their students and the student's parent or guardian to make decisions about how to prioritize access to grade-level content and learning expectations. Based on the student's strengths and barriers, teams should identify accessibility supports that will promote optimal access, ongoing practice, independence, and student success. As quoted by John Hattie, world-renowned education researcher, professor, and author, when teachers have high expectations and efficacy for all students, it has one of the highest impacts on student achievement. Therefore, all teachers should set high expectations for their students and impart knowledge, foster independence, motivate, and establish high-quality learning environments for all students to flourish. Educator teams should be looking at the following information so that students can achieve grade level standards. Teachers should regularly collaborate with other educators that know their student best. These educators may include EL and ML teachers and special education teachers. Educators should determine how the instructional materials and tools they already have within their classroom can benefit their students. For example, the use of math manipulatives, graphic organizers, or other materials and strategies that embrace the principles of universal design. Ensure that all students can access instruction and assessment content. Step 2 is to learn about different accessibility supports for instruction and assessment using the principles of UDL. As educators utilize different teaching approaches and formative measures of student learning, they should also provide students with choice that allows them to access instruction and assessment content with the greatest amount of confidence and independence. When planning for access, keep in mind that different assessments measure different specific content and vary in construct of knowledge, eliciting certain skills and abilities. Some assessments may be paper-based, while others are available digitally. Some assessments are untimed, while others are not. How can UDL support some of these different modalities, and how can you support your students? Professional development is a great way for educators to learn about and review accessibility supports available across content areas. Types of accessibility supports also vary across diagnostic and benchmark assessments and statewide assessments. Knowing which supports are available across platforms and assessments will help remove barriers. And when possible, educators should experience accessibility features firsthand and evaluate the appropriateness for their student population. For example, if the tool is digitalized, is the tool intuitive and easy to navigate? Does the tool allow the learner to pause, to go backward, to go forward, and to return to the home page? Can the tool be used independently? Is it the right tool for the job, or should other options be considered? Does the tool eliminate barriers or inadvertently perpetuate or create new barriers? If the tools are appropriate, introduce them to the class, explain how to use them, and have all students practice. Then students can decide on their own if the tool will be something that might support them. Remember the differences between accessibility supports and modifications. Accessible teaching is an ongoing collaborative practice. Be intentional about how accessibility supports, including technology, are integrated in the classroom and in learning opportunities. Educators should always strive to meet individual needs by reducing access barriers, not reducing learning expectations. As previously discussed, there are 3 categories for grouping supports based on student characteristics, need, and independence. They include universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations. And within each of these categories, 2 general types of accessibility features are available: those that are embedded and provided through the computer platform or digitalized, versus those that are provided to the student by the teacher or administrator. Here we provide a definition of universal tools and considerations the team can use. Remember, universal tools are available to all students. However, just because they are available doesn't mean they need to be used. Some tools may not be appropriate for students and can be a distractor. Therefore, universal tools can be turned off by the test administrator or the teacher prior to testing. Also remember that in the context of statewide assessments, different assessments use different platforms and offer different tools. Take time to learn about the unique accessibility features provided by each assessment and allow students the opportunity to practice them in advance of testing. Next, we provide a definition for designated supports. Again, designated supports are accessibility features available to students who need them based on the determination of an educator team with input from the student and the parent guardian. This should be based off the student's specific and unique learning styles. And when teams make these recommendations, these supports should be used consistently within the student's instructional setting. Next, we provide a definition for accommodations. These are for students with an IEP or a Section 504 plan. Accommodations are changes in materials or procedures that increase equitable access during assessments. These allow students to show what they know and what they can do. Like designated supports, accommodations should be used consistently throughout the student's instructional setting. They prioritize student needs and ensure equitable access. Some examples of accommodations include assistive technology, the use of American Sign Language, Braille, and closed captioning. And finally, we provide a definition for special documented accommodations. These are accommodations available to students with an IEP or 504 plan, and they're non-standard. These are accommodations that are available to students when the other embedded and non-embedded accommodations do not provide equitable access due to the student's disability in areas of barrier. These accommodations require testing in an individual setting, and they also require the most dependence on the teacher for providing access. We've included a tool called the Accessibility Chart for Smarter Balance and Next Generation Science Standards. This may be a familiar visual to you, but we'd like to highlight the organization of this chart. You'll see that we've identified the universal tools highlighted in the blue section, followed by the designated supports in the green section, and accommodations here in the orange. We've listed the embedded as well as the non-embedded options across each of these three levels. You'll see that there are hyperlinks that will give teachers access to information that supports the information on these tools, but we encourage our educators to look at how these tools can be used not only during instruction, but also in preparation for statewide testing. We do provide an accessibility chart for the Connecticut SAT School Day. It's available on the website, the CSDE website, if you're interested in looking at options available for 11th graders. We just want to reiterate that teams should understand the purpose and functionality of these tools, and extra care should be used when selecting them and making sure that they're not conflicting, such as the selection of text-to-speech of items versus a read aloud of items. We want our teams to be very deliberate in which support best meets the students' access needs. We've also created a tool here, or a resource rather, called the Description of Designated Supports and Accommodations for Smarter Balance and NGSS Assessments. This tool provides our PPTs and Section 504 teams with a brief explanation of each of the accessibility features. So this is a great go-to if you're looking for more information to explain how these different supports function. If you need more information about accessibility supports, please refer to the CSDE assessment guideline document available on our website. The third step in the 5-step decision-making process involves selecting accessibility supports for instruction and assessment. For example, what does a struggling reader need to access print across content areas? Would the student benefit from text-to-speech or Google Read Write? Does a student need support with written communication, such as organizing ideas, paraphrasing, and developing information using the text and evidence? Are there specific annotation materials or organizational charts that help orient the student? What supports may be needed to help students practice specific math skills? How about an abacus or the use of a number line? Are there certain math manipulatives that may help students with computation, such as the use of blocks and chips? Is a student not receiving enough supports or receiving too many? As we discussed before, teams will want to consider the student's strengths and barriers and strategies that have worked in the past and eliminate those that are not beneficial. Ultimately, the goal here in step 3 is to provide leverage and access so that students can show what they know and can do. Student involvement and feedback in the selection of accessibility supports is key. Take time to find out if the student likes using the support or accommodation. Find out if it's beneficial. Is it easy for the student to use? Or does the student have difficulty using the tool and therefore the student will not utilize the tool? With this information, alternatives can be determined. Step 4 of the decision-making process focuses on administration of accessibility supports during instruction and assessment. Teachers and educator teams should track the use and effectiveness of these supports during instruction. This enables equitable access to academic material, but also facilitates the students' transition away from specific supports when they become no longer necessary. Step 5, evaluating accessibility supports during instruction and assessment, will be covered next as we discuss establishing a system and procedure for accessibility supports. Katie is now going to provide you with some tools and resources for identifying, implementing, and evaluating accessibility supports.
Thanks, Deirdre. So finally, in the time that we have remaining, we're going to share some suggestions for establishing that systematic process that can be used not only within the classroom, your schools, and at the district level to support the identification, implementation, and evaluation of accessibility supports during instruction and assessments. So as educators, evaluate student strengths, needs, and barriers to instruction. They can use guiding questions to bridge the barriers and establish the appropriate accessibility feature. So some questions that educator teams may want to consider are, what are the students' specific instructional and assessment strengths? What are the students' specific instructional and assessment needs? How does facilitating the students' access to the curriculum, instruction, and assessment support the goal of developing and fostering independence for that student? Is there a universal feature that the student should not have because it increases barrier? What is the level of student usage of the accessibility support? Has it shown that it increases accessibility? Has it shown that it decreases or increases independence? How does the student feel about using the support? If the student doesn't like it or feel that the tool is helpful, they may not use it, like Deirdre mentioned previously. Getting that student feedback is critical. And does the student need any designated supports or accommodations based on the information and data that we have gathered? Are all different questions that teams can consider when discussing and looking at different accessibility features. So this is a resource for teams to use. This is an example of different steps that your team can use when establishing a systematic process for identifying and implementing and evaluating accessibility supports and going through those 5 steps. So one of the big things is that you want to determine who your team members will be that will be supporting and implementing these features and have them at the table. It is important that all staff are aware of and have an understanding of the available accessibility supports. So going back to what Deirdre said, training is key. Knowing what the tools are, knowing how they work in relation to the different platforms, and how they increase access and the different constructs of how the student accesses them within the platforms and the cognitive load that's required for each individual accessibility tool is key. So having that information and having that training on that is important. Also identifying with that, what supports are applicable based on that student profile. So if we know the student is strong in the visual processing, we're going to want to accentuate that support based on that strength to increase their independence and reduce that barrier for the need. So you want to take all this information, the data that you've collected, as well as parent and student feedback to select which tools are most appropriate for the instructional setting. You want to provide the student with access and application to these accessibility supports prior to testing. So you really want to see how they interact with them, how they navigate through them, and take information and data on that and come back to the table and really discuss, was this the right tool for the job? So you really want to continuously monitor and collect information on student usage, feedback, and behavior on the accessibility tools. And we say continuous because as the student progresses and their learning profile changes as they develop, some tools may no longer be needed. So we don't want to continue to have those tools on there, or they may need additional tools in order to support them and their next step in learning acquisition and application. So as you can see, we advocate that this process includes educators, students, and families. It also entails a pre-planning and training so that all staff have an understanding of these tools and how each unique accessibility feature is presented. Just as data making decisions and processes are critical to instructional planning, and a data analysis should be confirmed the effectiveness of barrier reduction. Additionally, this review should be ongoing and continuous, like I said, because the student is growing and developing because of the different instructional practices. We recommend that districts implement a clear and consistent process to conduct this work and develop a means in order to increase equity and consistency throughout practices within the district. As district leaders or coaches or educational staff, you may not see inconsistency in how accessibility features are assigned, or you may see inconsistencies in how accessibility features are assigned between schools or grades or even classrooms. For example, in one building, all students could have text-to-speech, while in another building, only a small percentage are assigned text-to-speech. Remember that when assigning accessibility accommodations, this is not a one-size-fits-all, and it really should be individualized to that student's unique and jagged learning profile. We also have included this resource for teams to consider. This chart helps identify possible responsibilities for district level and school level teams to aid in supporting and implementing the evaluation process and assigning of accessibility supports. In this tool, we've put in here of how items should be communicated out, how we evaluate the effectiveness of tools, professional development, like Deirdre said before, is key, and that knowing, as well as developing a plan for how these features are reviewed and assessed and determined for each and every student. We've also put it for the school level as well, as looking at how we're going to do these steps in order to get it so you have a clear and consistent process across school and districts. It is important, like Deirdre said, to gather students' perspective on which tools and accessibility features students feel are helpful to them. This not only creates voice and choice for the student, but empowers them in their own learning. The Council of Chief State School Officers, or CCSSO, develop tools that can be adapted by districts and teams to support the 5-step decision-making process. For example, this questionnaire elicits information from the student's perspective. These questions can be answered by the student independently or as part of an interview process. Be certain the student understands the concepts of accessibility supports or the universal tools, designated supports, or accommodations they may have, and provide examples as necessary. Teams would want to be part of the trial or want to use this as part of a trial or after trying a practice test. Educators may also want to provide a list of possible accessibility supports to the student to give the student a good understanding of the range of supports that may be available to them. So we're always looking at what is the best fit for the student and also what the student feels is the best fit for them. Additionally, to support ongoing evaluations, teams can use the after-test accessibility questions template once they have completed a practice test or test administration to interview a student about accessibility supports provided. For example, universal tools or designated supports or accommodations that may have been assigned to them. Which supports were used? Were they useful? Should they be used again? Educators can note these adjustments or difficulties experienced by the students, either on how the accessibility support was administered or and using accessibility support during the assessment. This form can also be completed by educator teams based on their observations. Depending on the age and grade, this questionnaire can be completed independently by students. Additionally, the accessibility supports in the classroom questions for educator teams is a tool that educator teams can use to collaborate and get feedback from all vested parties, including the student if applicable. This chart can track different aspects of different ways in which a student used the accessibility supports, once again, universal tools or designated supports or accommodations, and in the classroom setting. This will help inform consistent decision-making process on these accessibility supports. So is the student using it consistently within the classroom? Is it documented in their plan? What types of tasks is it used for? Does the student use it for every task or certain tasks? And what is the usage when the student does use it? Does the student use it alone or with assistant, either a peer or an aide? If more than one support is available, how do these supports interact? Does one accessibility support seem more effective when used with the other? Or is the accessibility support not effective when used with the other? Is it a distractor? If the accessibility support is presented differently on the test, for example, Desmos calculator, how can you give that student opportunities to practice with it? So that's really key, is what are the opportunities that the student has to practice with that accessibility feature in order for them to gain that understanding, that accessibility, that independence, that accuracy, and the ability to generalize it from one activity to the next activity and to transfer that knowledge and be able to have that comfort level. So if they're using even Google Read and Write text-to-speech feature, can they transfer that now into the smarter balanced text-to-speech feature with accuracy and automaticity? So now we're going to go through some resources that we have put together that we feel that will help your teams in this 5-step decision-making process for accessibility and accommodations. So we've put together here a list of available resources that you might find helpful and your teams might find helpful for universal design for learning. We have put the CAST UDL website here. We've also put in some other information that you can bring back to your teams to help them gain a deeper understanding of what UDL is, if it may be new to them, just some resources to help you with this process. The next slide we have here for resources is accessible educational resources. So we've listed here some resources and some sites here that may be helpful for teams when looking at the different accessible educational resources. Additionally, we've listed here, and this is not an exhaustive list, of different summative assessment resources for our statewide assessments. These resources can also be found on our CSDE website as well as the Connecticut Comprehensive Portal. Additionally, we've also listed here different assessment, alternate assessment resources for PPT and decision-making teams for our alternate assessments. And we've also listed here for you some ELML resources for our ELML population. Some of them are test specific, some of them are from different resources and that will provide information on equitable grading and grading guidance documents. We've also listed here for our duly identified population that are ELML and either special education or 504, lost links, accommodations. And we've also listed here, we now have available CT-SEDS and statewide accommodation resources. So these are resources that we have compiled for teams that are specific to to Connecticut assessments and accommodations, designated supports, and universal tools and features that will help support PPT teams in their decision-making process. We've also linked in here the documents that we shared in previous slides with the CC-SSO questions to ask when selecting accessibility features. We showed you 3 of them. There are also several other ones that we did not have time in this presentation to share with you, so please check that resource out. It is a great tool for teams to use when looking at this process. We've also listed here some resources for parents and guardians. These resources can help them understand how their student is doing and share information about their child with teams. And it also gives information for parents in parent-friendly terms about the different Connecticut summative assessments. So we'd like to thank you, and we'll we'll take a look at the chat and see if there's some questions.
Katie and Deirdre, thank you for the awesome presentation on the best practices. And I haven't seen any questions come in the chat yet, but certainly if you want to drop them in, we're not quite at 10 o'clock. We have time. We'd be happy to take them.
And also in that time frame, we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules and attending this office hour session. We hope this information has been helpful to you and to your teams, and that you find these resources and tools beneficial. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we ask that you take a brief moment to complete this survey here. This will not only give us information on maybe some items that you found beneficial from this presentation, but also if there's items that you're looking for that we can look at developing for the future, you can put that in the into this survey as well. And I'll leave this up, and if someone wants to also put that into the chat, that would be amazing for our teams that are on this call with us. And I will come back to this slide, but I just want to let you know that in the slide that's been shared, we do have our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you have. We're here to support you throughout your process.